everyone, and welcome back to the futuristic, but also present-day, Comic Vault. 'Tis I, Captain Logan, and joining me today again is my good buddy, Austin. Hello, Austin.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
How are you, sir?
I'm pretty good. I got my Simpsons and Futurama background.
You are all ready to go. You got your Simpsons t-shirt?
Yep.
Yep. You should have a Simpsons ball cap, though,
Nope.
because...
I'm gone.
because you can't review a Simpsons comic if you don't have a Simpsons ball cap.
I don't wear hats. I'm Canadian. Come on now.
And also, you'd have a hard time with that because of the headphones.
Well, yeah, that too. I mean, I could try to squeeze it under.
Austin, I do believe this is your very first Comic Vault.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, I think... Oh, no, I was going to say every single video I've been in has been some sort of different video, but no, because we did two commentaries.
Of commentaries now, but you've also done gameplay footage and a couple
After
After Darks. Yeah, but welcome to the Vault. Austin does read comics. It's not like he hasn't been here because he doesn't read comics. We just haven't gotten around to having him on a Vault
This
yet.
is my first comic, so...
Oh, yeah? What do you think of
every comic is your first.
What do you think of the entire medium of comic books, Austin?
Well, I mean, I feel like this gave me a rundown of all comics. So, like, I don't think I'll ever need to read any Crisis books, because I basically did.
That's not true. That's not true at all. Partly because of the ways in which this is better than a lot of like crossover and Crisis type books, and like it's a parody of those things, but it also gets around some of the stuff that makes those irritating, which is interesting.
Okay, yeah, see, I haven't read any of the Crisis books, like, being serious now.
Oh, okay.
So I wondered if I maybe missed something with that. Like, if there's maybe, like, jokes that I wouldn't get, but
no,
I didn't notice any.
It does less of that than I remembered. I thought it was more of a parody of comic events than it is. It's more of, like, it's keeping in mind the medium completely, which is one of the things I really love about it, but it's not as much of a parody of the whole Crisis idea and just, like, comic event crossovers as something like IDW's Super Secret Crisis War, the Cartoon Network, Powerpuff Girls and Dexter and et cetera crossover that was more kind of making fun of that stuff. I think they just put that stuff in the title because it's a comic crossover and comic fans will know what that's making fun of.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, because that's how you pitched it to me, was like, oh, it was this huge Crisis parody. So it's probably stuff that went over my head.
Yeah, not really. And like, it's not intentionally super convoluted or something. That's a thing that a lot of like actual parodies of or more straight up parodies of a big comic event will do, where they just make it like as unbelievably complicated as possible, and it has like, you know, way too many main characters.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. It does make fun of the giant like end of the series or end of the issue plot twist, where it's like, whoa, you didn't expect this thing, like the big status quo changer. It does do that.
Yeah, and like the big like two-page spreads where it's like every single character just like all there.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves yet, because here in a second I want to set this up, but I will say the thing that most stuck with me with this, because I first read this over a decade ago, and I always remember it as one of my favorite like event books and just trades. I think a lot of my love for this just boils down to, this is a beautiful product. And I just always remember how cool this book is. But the thing that always really stuck with me, and I'm like it's a really fun crossover. It's really creative. It does a lot of fun things with the medium. It's a comic book. This can't be adapted. It wouldn't make any sense to do that. I love stuff like that. But the thing that always really stuck with me is that two-page spread where Fry goes, where it's got all the characters, and he goes, this would make for a really great two-page spread in a comic. And like, that always stuck with me. That's where it really won me over. I was like, that's lovely.
Yeah, at the exact halfway point. Yeah,
it's so good. But anyway, so I brought Austin in on this. This is a thing I've wanted to talk about for years, and I'm not. I mean, I don't know how thorough and ins and outs we're gonna be on this. It's Simpsons and it's Futurama, and obviously a lot of your like or dislike for a thing like this is gonna be your humor sensibilities, and what brand of this kind of like Simpsons and Futurama you want for something. If you're a fan, because people are really particular, especially about Simpsons. With this particular kind of thing. So most of what I want to do is just kind of break it down and tell you what it is and try to get people to read this, because I think it's really cool, and I've always wanted to bring it up and mention it somewhere is the main reason I wanted to talk about it. But I brought in Austin because Austin is a giant Simpsons fan, and I somewhat recently realized, because Austin is I've known you maybe a year now, and
something like that, yeah.
As long as I've known you, I've known that you've liked The Simpsons and you quote it a lot.
I mention it constantly.
It was only recently that I realized just how into that show you are. Austin, I think, knows The Simpsons, at least the seasons he knows, at least the earlier seasons. Like I know Star Trek.
Yeah, well, John on the Discord constantly makes fun of me in that Simpsons is to me what like Star Trek is to Mike on Red Letter Media.
Yeah,
where you can't get through a conversation with him without him mentioning it.
And it's weird that, and this is maybe the only way that I could compare The Simpsons to Star Trek, but it's sort of like Star Trek in that there's so much of it and it's so versatile that it hits that like you can use it to make a lot of like comparisons and observations on a lot of different topics, right? Like that's why it comes up all the time. Is it hits everything somewhere.
Like anything could happen to me, and I'll be like, oh, well, that reminds me of like this one random joke in this episode.
Yeah. But anyway, so I wanted to have Austin come in with me on this because as much as he knows The Simpsons and you know Futurama too, but not like The Simpsons, you had never read this.
Yeah, no, I'd never read any. Funny enough, I've only ever read Futurama comics.
Oh, weird.
I've read a few of those, but I've never read any Simpsons comics until now. So like it was like really cool getting to do some of that. Yeah, I got my book with me too.
Yeah, so this is the way. The background thing makes it very difficult to show things. If I ever bring back recommends, I'm going to insist that whoever is with me, if they're remote, does not do that, because you won't be able to show anything. So this is the way to read this. I told Austin about it, and he, instead of buying the issues, he went and got this. And so, a real quick story. Years ago, I got on one of these like sci-fi book club subscriptions, and where every month they'll send you a couple of books that you don't really care about unless you fill out the form and say and chat mark like, no,
please don't send me
please don't send me anything, or I want these things instead. And I signed up on this thing, and I stayed on it for a few months, and I actually bought some things intentionally with it. I think there were a couple things that I got non-intentionally, because that's how they get you. My wife and I were on a DVD club like that for a long time, or for a little bit, and we have this joke, that this ongoing joke that we still bring up to this day, where this is an aside, where we once accidentally bought the first season of Fringe. Because of that, still in the shrink wrap. We've never pulled that out. It's been like, I don't know, 12 years, 13 years. And
for some reason, they just kept sending you DVDs of Waterworld for some reason. I guess they just had a lot of them laying around.
Or Speed. We have so many copies of the same movie. And anyway, so we have this kind of ongoing joke, my wife and I, where something unfortunate will happen, and I'll say, well, it could be worse. You could have accidentally bought Fringe. So anyway, so this is one of the things I got when I initially signed up to that, where you get like 5 things for $1 a piece or something, and I was like, well, that looks cool, so I bought that. It comes in this really neat slipcase where, when you put the book back in, you can flip it over and pick a side, and then you can have the Futurama guys inside a time vortex with the you can show yours now, with the Simpsons around it, and vice versa. And I don't know, it's so above and beyond. I haven't seen a lot of things go as far as this does.
Yeah, when I got it, I was like, this is a really beautiful hardcover. And then if you open it up to the back, they have a printing of the first issue of the original Simpsons comic.
Which is here partly because it is relevant to the actual book, and you won't know why that is until you get to the end of the very last issue, which is really fun. And then there's even a couple of interludes in the middle that you wouldn't get, or not in the middle, but after each of the two crossovers that you wouldn't get if you read the original issues. So this is effectively a 4-issue miniseries, but what it actually is two-issue miniseries, one of which is a sequel to the other, but I think it reads as a complete piece.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. 'Cause, I mean, you and I didn't even realize that until later, because Cap found out about like, part 2 and was like, oh, there's a second one.
The second one. No, there's not. I read it already. It's in here. Turns out. But it's a really cool way to do this. And so the first of these actually has a longer title, and I forget what it is, but they put, if you buy it in issues, it's like crossover, like something crisis. Like it's a longer title. And
oh, really?
So yeah, and so in order to put the two sets together, they just simplified it to crossover crisis. And I don't even think that title is in the book. I think if you have to go, look at the original issues to see.
Oh yeah, at the end of the issue it just says Chapter 2. It doesn't list the full title.
Yeah.
Because in Part 2, they list the full title during the midway point.
Oh, I see. Okay. But anyway, so I want to suggest, Austin, and tell me if I'm right about this, because you said you'd never read any the comic side of Simpsons. I think this serves really well as a good just introduction to bongo graining.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, because reading this made me really want to go and read some more of them. And I bought a bunch of them in bulk, so I'm going to be able to.
Cool. Yeah, and I need to do that too. Every time I've read this, I've always had that, where I'm like, I want to go read some... And I've read a few here and there. They usually have pretty good Free Comic Day issues, and I interviewed one of the main artists on the Simpsons book like 8 or 10 years ago, and I read some things around that, but it's been a while now since I've read any of that stuff. But the thing I've always been impressed with is just there's a consistency of quality with the Bongo Simpsons books, of what little I've looked at. It seems like the art is always really consistent. Like, no matter who's drawing it, it always looks like that show, and it's and like I think that's really impressive. That like there aren't a lot of examples, I don't think, where people come in and just get weird with it. I'm sure there's some of that, but usually it just seems like they're trying to like make that TV show in comic book form. And yet, I would argue that if for some weird reason, Austin, you never thought to... This would never happen, but if you never thought to watch an episode of that show and you just read the Simpsons comic, it's just a really good comic strip.
Yeah. We had going back to your art thing, like there's characters that only appear once in the show, and they're spot on. Like there's even... you get the head of Stan Lee at one point. I don't know if you'll be able to see this.
Yeah.
But he looks exactly like he does in his one guest appearance on The Simpsons, and they're drawing him that exact same way, but in the Futurama art style. Like, and it's really amazing how well they're able to catch that art style.
Yeah, it's a really impressive attention to detail, and which is interesting. It's kind of an odd juxtaposition because it's really simple art.
Yeah.
But there's this massive attention to detail. And what I appreciate about being able to look at it on a page is you'll have 1,000 things going on in, especially the big like full page spreads, but even in some panels where it's like, here's all these really fun sight gags and stuff, and I actually have time to look at them. And The Simpsons show does that too. and sometimes you don't have time to look at it, which is part of the point, and it makes them really rewatchable and stuff. And sometimes you kind of just want to pause and look at stuff, especially like amusing signs and things. But what's really nice about this medium for The Simpsons is that you can slow yourself down and just look at it. Like, I think in some ways comics is as good of a medium for this material as television, even though you don't get the performances.
Yeah, and even then, because I think they get every single character's voice down, where I can hear the actors in my head like delivering the lines. So I mean, but I also know that show super well, so I can basically picture probably exactly how they'd read them.
But I'm with you. Like, there's a really good attention to some of it's phonetic spelling, but there's not a whole ton of that, luckily. But some of it's just like what to bold, what to italicize, what to emphasize.
Yeah.
That makes it in your head sound like those characters. And yet, to my earlier point, I think if you read a whole bunch of Simpsons comics for some reason, then you went to the show, you'd be like, oh yeah, they sort of sound like what they did in my head. Like, they got the right actors to play these characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of like if you went from like Peanuts to the cartoon of Peanuts.
Oh, okay, yeah, like the Charlie Brown stuff.
Yeah.
Which I've never read any of that. I've only ever seen the Christmas special. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. They also just have a lot of fun little gags from the show. Like, one thing I thought of a while ago while watching it is how much again, I don't know if you can see this, but the character on like the comic shop, how much he looks like Bender.
Oh yeah,
it's basically that design, and then they call attention to stuff like that. And I thought a lot of that stuff was really fun.
There's also occasionally jokes, and I'm thinking specifically of a thing in that interlude issue at the end. There's occasionally jokes that only work. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's actually the earlier interlude issue that work in a comic that actually you couldn't pull off in any way in another medium, in like the TV medium. There's a joke about I'm trying to remember what it was. It's like two different. Oh, I know what it is. It's the two different spellings of color, of like British color versus our color, and it's spoken where it's like where it's like I have a British TV and I'm gonna force people to only have like British color TVs with a U. You can't do that joke in a cartoon.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't.
That's
make sense.
Awesome. And then, of course, the book itself is very much about the medium of comics. Like, I think I like this for some of the same reasons I really like Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. Because it's about this medium. Let's Austin set up this premise and talk about why this is, or at least I think this is kind of the best way to do a Futurama and Simpsons as a crossover, because it was a thing that for years some fans really wanted on TV and some fans thought was a bad idea and you could never really cross it. And this is a wonderful compromise because it's in comics, it's not on television, and it's not saying that Simpsons and Futurama are in the same world, because I just never bought that.
When they finally did a TV show crossover, that's what they did.
That's what they did, and we'll talk about that later, because I watched that again for this, like you did, because I haven't seen it in a lot of years, and we can compare them and break that down a little bit later if you want to.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, it's super forgettable, but...
Well, I was going to say, part of the problem with it is it doesn't stick with me, but there's some things that it does that this also does, and I wondered if it stole things from this, or if they're just natural things that you'd get to, if you were going to put these together. Like, the first thing Homer and Bender do is they go to the bar, stuff like that. Yeah. But anyway, so... We put them together by saying that in the Futurama universe, the Simpsons are a fictional universe that like in our world is in all these different media. And it's funny because since it's a comic and since it's Bongo, they kind of treat it like the comics are a bigger deal than the TV show.
I thought about that in a few places. Like when the Simpsons go to the actual like New York of Futurama, The newscaster says the Simpsons have arrived from the Simpsons comic, and I was like, you'd think it would be the TV show that they would go to first. But yeah, I did notice that too.
But I mean, when they show you the comic heads at the beginning, 3 of them are like really, you know, obvious creators you'd think that would be there, and then there's like the guy from First Comics, like who even name one thing they published. Like regular people in the comments, name one thing they published, like, you know, and then the Bongo guy. I'm like, yeah, okay, because it's Bongo making it, but First, nobody remembers that.
I've never even heard of Eclipse Comics.
That was in there too.
There.
Am I right? First was in there, right?
Yep, I'm looking at that page literally right now because there's another thing that amazed me for being a book that was written in 2006, which is an Ego of the Living Planet reference.
Yes. Yeah, the Nerd Planet.
Yeah. Because when I first read it, I was like, oh, that's funny. And then I looked to see when it came out, and I was like, that's even more amazing.
Yeah, it's great. No, that's pretty deep pull. And there's not a lot of that. Like, there's not a lot of big 2 comic references because it's not a superhero thing. And there's one big token one in the second part where they have toward the end they're going to have a lot of fictional characters from from like literature, from like all of literature come alive.
Yeah, it turns into a crossover between all of literature and not just Simpsons and Futurama.
Which is funny because I mentioned Deadpool Kills in the Marvel Universe. That's what the sequel to that does, also.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Strangely, there's a lot of comparisons I could make between the 2 books.
Yeah, and I've read that.
The biggest difference, and I don't know what you'd think of it, and I don't know how you feel about Deadpool in general, but because everybody's got an opinion about Deadpool. But the big difference is, weirdly, this is not exactly meta. I mean, there's places where it gets a little meta, but it's never like you're reading the book that they're in. It kind of separates itself from that, right? There's one really...
Yeah, the Futurama is the real world, and then Simpsons is a comic book world, and that's how they handle it. So it's never like it's all a comic that you're reading.
And then you happen to be reading it all as a comic book. So sort of like Watchmen, and I can't believe I'm making that comparison, it's playing with the medium.
That was the first thing I thought of when I read this.
It's playing... Well, yeah, because I also read that first in one of the most beautiful hardcovers that I'd ever picked up. So it reminded me of it on that level. No, sort of like Watchmen, it's a... It's a book that is about comics, but it's not. But again, it's not meta about it. It's not like what Morrison does with Multiversity, where like you're reading the book, that like you're reading it actually affects the story in some way. You know, it's not that whole thing. But there's this really fun bit where Fry and Bart are looking at a comic and it has changed. It's sort of that like Back to the Future thing.
Spaceballs thing. Oh yeah, or Back to the Future.
That too. Yeah, we're like it changes based on what's happening now, where it was going to work out a certain way, but then you changed things, so now it's different. Muppet Movie had this too, where like you read the script to find out where you're supposed to go next. And so I guess Back to the Future is not how like where to go next. It's just you can change things, and so that's why I suggested Back to the Future. But anyway, so they're reading the page that you're looking at. That's as close to meta as it gets, where it's like...
that's why I thought the Spaceballs, because it's that shot where they're watching themselves.
Yes! Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's really great.
I have an odd... I guess we're jumping all over the place. I have an odd nitpick about that page. It's kind of strange. So they look at... they're trying to figure out where to go next, like I said, and they're able to read the comic to give them information, and it's exactly the scene they're looking at. So like it predicts the future, which I guess is, I mean, I don't want to nitpick this part too hard because like it's a really absurdist book, and like I don't want to get too much into like internal logic and stuff because it's Simpsons, but like it's predicting the future, but you've been able to change it. So, like, how far ahead does that work, right? Where it's like the next 2 pages are going to happen exactly this way, but like you've changed what so I don't know. Does that mean that like they could see it and then just go? Like, yeah. I'm sorry. What?
I said, like, could you read the whole comic? Like, is it fully finished like that, or like?
I'm gonna assume not, because but then this is weird, and this is the thing I wanted to nitpick. So there's
Yeah, because it is just kind of there, and then they drop it.
Yeah. Well, there's no dialogue on the page where it's happening right now, but then the next page has all the dialogue, which I found kind of curious.
I didn't even pick up on that.
Isn't that weird?
That's hilarious, yeah. That's really strange.
It's really strange. So, Austin, for the sake 25 minutes into our video, for the sake of context, tell us, won't you, how the Simpsons come alive in the Futurama universe?
Okay, so... Oh, how they come to life?
Or I guess strike that, reverse it, because in the first part, so it's fun because in each miniseries we did put one in the other universe. So in the first one, the Futurama guys wind up in a Simpsons comic.
Yeah, so the Futurama people, they're taking the world's biggest comic book collection to the Geek E galaxy, where they're going to be sealed away forever, and which doesn't. Which Fry doesn't really like. But they get there, and the brains from the Futurama show, they end up trapping the Futurama characters into a Simpsons comic book, where obviously shenanigans happen. And they're able to create a portal out of the comic, which then brings all the Simpsons characters into the Futurama world.
At the end.
Yeah, at the end, and then that's how we get into that one.
And then in the second part, we get an explanation for why why reality got or the walls between the realities got cut at the end, because they just have this big 2-page spread where it's like they're here now and it's this big plot twist, and we don't totally know why that happened. And then they could have left it, like it could have been, because again originally that was published as just 2 issues, and once you have it all, it reads like one complete story, I think, where it's just kind of in 2 parts. But initially, it's just kind of this fun, ridiculous reveal, and they come up with a really fun explanation for it. Like, it for the sake of this, it works. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, because I just assumed it was going to be something like, oh, whatever they did to get out of the comic just brought everybody with them, and then they have like a whole scene where they reveal it,
And it turns out it's just Farnsworth trying to beat that other scientist guy that they
with his Dr. Octopus tickling hand.
Yeah, in a science fair where I forget that guy's name, but they're all in the show. They're always in. That's right. They're always in competition, and so he's like, oh, I don't have a machine, because because I've already lost, so I need another machine. And so the machine he comes up with is a pair of scissors that can cut through to fictional realities. And so he just ends up bringing all the Simpsons there.
Yeah, because his demonstration is he cuts up a Simpsons comic. So then, of course, they ask him, well, what's the good of that? And of course, it's free slave labor, because fictional characters don't have
they don't have any rights.
Yes, then that,
which is super clever.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. And then so the second part of the story ends up being all the Simpsons on the run because they're going to be put into slavery.
And then you have this whole bit where like the Simpsons family itself gets to go be on the ship with Fry and his crew, and they're like, well, we're gonna save you from slavery by enslaving you ourselves.
Enslaving you.
Yeah, they're like, we're gonna make you work for no pay. Isn't that slavery?
Well, the difference is whipping.
Yep.
Yeah, and that part's pretty fun, where they like go on different deliveries and they kind of just go into different sci-fi films, basically, where they're in like Aliens, which is like a pretty funny joke where there's like a xenomorph that bursts out of Bender's chest with his beer.
Yep.
And
but better than that is the xenomorph that has a wrench for a tongue.
I don't even think I noticed that one.
Yeah, there's a huge xenomorph in the center of that page that's got a wrench for a tongue.
Oh, I didn't notice that it had a wrench for a tongue. That's hilarious. And then I don't know if you went through kind of like the artwork in the back, but they also showed off some other characters that didn't make it into the book.
I didn't look super deep at that, no.
Yeah, and they give you like the full Marvel characters as well, because when we see them and the DC characters, they're only ever in shadow.
It's like Spawn number 10.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is exactly like that. Oh my god, it does have a wrench for a tongue. That's hilarious.
Like I said, I mean, like, it's hard not to just gush about this hardcover, but the back of this, like, all the extra art is really cool, and you get all the variant covers, of course.
Yeah, then they have a ton of art in the back. It's great. They got a lot of stuff like the one I'm looking at.
What do you think of ultra generic Dracula, Mayor Dracula?
Oh yeah, well when they first come out,
he just goes on TV and he goes, "I want to suck your blood, blood." Ridiculous.
Well, I thought it was funny with that too, because when they all come out of the books, because at the end of the first, or I guess it's the third issue if you count it all as one book.
Yeah.
They end up throwing the scissors into the library, and it cuts through all of literature, basically.
Yeah, because Bender's like, I threw it into a building where there's no people, because nobody ever goes there.
It's not gonna hurt anyone. It's in a library.
And then Farnsworth goes, "Oh, we've woken up all of literature."
Yeah, and you get a pretty cool, like big full page spread that's just like that whole Simpsons one, but it's all of literature now on the street.
Yeah.
And at first, it's mostly actually I think it's all in that first kind of spread. It's all mostly like public domain characters. And then when they actually
with a few exceptions, they get away with some Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, but just in this first image, it's all public domain.
Oh, that's
stuff.
true. Yeah.
And then as they keep going, they throw in other stuff. Like they have this one where they're all being attacked by different Stephen King characters.
Yeah, that's great. Carrie's there.
Yeah.
And Jack Torrance.
Yeah, and Cujo and Christine. Yeah, no, that's pretty fun. And then there's like, there's some Cat in the... Or they had Cat in the Hat. That's in one of the concept arts. But they ended up cutting him. And they have one face here that says, it looks too much like Seuss.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. Well, there's one panel that has him and they colored him different. But there's another pair of characters, I'm forgetting who,
that
are
are jumping
Dr.
on
Seuss.
Homer.
Hop on Pop. Hop on Pop, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what that was.
Yeah, no, I did notice that they were there.
So yeah, that was really clever. That felt like one of those, I don't know, it's all really authentic, right? Like that felt like one of those things the show very easily could have done. My only minor gripe with it, and again, this is maybe not a fair criticism of a Simpsons thing, but I'm gonna go here anyway. My only complaint about it is the Simpsons are all completely in character, and so that we can have an army of bad guys, we make all of the literary characters bad.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you'd think that several of them would choose to do different things than all just be in an army and take over because they can. Mm-hmm. I didn't really understand that when the Simpsons are just in character.
Yeah, because the Simpsons characters are all just them. But all the literary characters are like a giant mob that all act as one unit, basically.
Yeah, and there are certain bits in panels where they seem to have kind of their own personalities, but they're still acting kind of as one big unit. And it's not just the Simpsons family; it's the entire Simpsons universe. They all are in character. Yeah,
even just like the random side characters they do stuff with.
But I don't know. That's a minor thing, but that took me out a little bit. But I like the novelty, and obviously a lot of this is novelty. I like the novelty of having all the Simpsons characters figuring out like ways to survive in the Futurama world. And I could have lived there longer. Honestly, they make a case for this as a monthly, I think. I think you easily could have done 12 to 25 issues of the Simpsons characters all in the Futurama universe and like or future, and like how do they live and survive?
Yeah.
Easily. Yeah, I would have read that.
Stuff with Burns and with Smithers, where Smithers takes over the the Nimbus, the giant ship that it's like their Enterprise parody.
Well, and there's another, and there's another cliffhanger at the end, just like with the first one, that they totally could have run with the Burns clone.
That's what I was thinking too. I assumed when you mentioned the part 2 thing to me that's what it was building off of.
And they never made it. And this is what, 14, 15 years old now?
It's from 2006. Yeah, exactly. They could easily make a sequel to that, but I guess they don't have like the idea to do it. Maybe they don't want to just force it.
Yeah, and I mean,
good on them for that.
Yeah, definitely. Because I would assume the second one probably still sold pretty well. They made this crazy hardcover, like it must have done okay for for them. But do you agree with me that like, if because I'm with you, they clearly had a lot of integrity if they decided not to make more because they didn't have an idea, but this read like you could have kept going.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. There's definitely like a lot of stuff that they could have done more with.
I do love the symmetry of it though.
Yeah, doing like 2 on both sides.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
That's great, because I mean they gave both universes equal credence, but in each of them, like if they'd only left it with that first miniseries, it still would have been a great read and a really cool novelty, and you wouldn't have felt gypped because the Futurama characters get plenty to do in that. Like they get so much done in what, like 50 pages, 45 pages?
Yeah, something like that. And I mean, there's a lot of deep pulls too that they bring in as well, just like random lines or random characters they have in the background. Like there's one where Lisa meets Leela. She's being bullied by, I don't know, she's being bullied by 2 characters that have only really made like 1 episode appearances. And one of them is from a season 6 episode, and the other is, I think, from season 13. So it's all around the board. It's not just like, here's the classic stuff you all remember.
Yeah.
It's they definitely just know their stuff about the show in general.
Well, I mean, it's the
shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's the guys that have been working on both of those comics. I think, like the nice thing is they would already be in that headspace because they'd already clearly they're doing their research already and they're really familiar. And there's so much reverence for both. Like easily one could have taken over over the other, and it feels like equal parts a Simpsons and a Futurama thing. The love for this material reminds me a lot of, and just the quality of it, reminds me a lot of the crossovers that they did before the license changed over with when Kaboom was doing the DuckTales books, when they did like this huge event thing where but I think it was an ongoing where they had like all the Duck stuff from Disney all in one universe. You had DuckTales with Darkwing Duck, and like this reads like that to me.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, like it's well, I mean that makes sense to be like something to go to since they're both like show comics.
And of course that's different because those are already in the same universe and they did cross, but I'm just saying that like they treated it with kind of some gravitas where, like it was a big deal. Yeah. This is a big event comic. And it's what you'd want if you were gonna do this, I think. And like I said, I love that premise, that we would make the Simpsons characters because you'd think you'd go the other way. Like I love the idea that they're the fictional characters, and like the weirder show is the real world. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's the less popular one that's the real one too. Not that like Futurama it isn't as like good or anything, but obviously the Simpsons will never end, and the Futurama's been canceled.
Actually got an ending, but it did keep coming back for a while. It was like it was still a phenomenon. It just wasn't a phenomenon.
Yeah, it didn't like change like most of TV. Yeah, no, definitely. And then, I mean, we get all the literature stuff, so it's huge crossover by the end of it. And it's pretty cool that they bring in the because how they deal with all the literature characters is by bringing in the giant Homer from the original issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's pretty cool that they brought that back.
It's like I guess I'm just comparing this to a bunch of other things right now. It's like the comic equivalent.
All stuff I haven't read too. Come on.
Yeah, but it's like the comic equivalent of something like Turtles Forever. And
yeah.
It's like, you never thought you'd see this, and so if we're gonna do it, we're gonna really do it up. But again, with this, it's more about the comic side, and so like they also and it's not self-indulgent, right? Like they're also paying homage to their own history, but they're not obnoxious with it. Like, not only do they not care if you've read anything, like honestly, at the point that I read this first, I had seen like hardly any Futurama. Like I didn't know that show, and I didn't find this difficult to read at all. And yeah, it's a lot of characters, and if you've never seen any of either, I don't know why you'd even think to look at this, but you'd probably be it probably wouldn't be as easy to look at, and it might not be quite as funny. But they don't go crazy with the referential humor, like all the stuff that the referential humor, I should say. All the stuff that you're talking about with like references to specific episodes and stuff. If you catch that stuff, it's great. But if you don't, it's just background material, and like you never need any of it. It's pretty easy to follow, even if you're not super familiar with this stuff. So like they don't care if you know about Giant Homer.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know about that really when I read this. I read that issue after.
But when they put out the hardcover, they're so not self-indulgent, they give you the issue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of cool that every single issue that they mention in the book is like included in there. Although we weren't sure if the interlude issues were like original for this or if they were like reprints.
My guess is they must be original for this, because you'd think that they would like tell you where they were printed in the first place.
Yeah.
And you said that
the first one at least has to be. The second one could go either way because it's so disconnected.
Right, but it's also so short that it couldn't have been published on its own. It would have had to be like in back matter for something, or like in a free comic day issue. It felt like an issue that would be shoved into an annual or in like a free comic day issue.
Yeah.
If it was gonna be anywhere else, so I'm not sure, but no, it's super cool that there's two comics that are talked about as being things that Fry was reading, that he was familiar with, I think, and the first one is the comic that the Futurama people actually end up going into. And then, I'm sorry. The second one's not a Fry thing. The second one is, like, here's a thing with Chief Wiggum that happened, and then I think Fry's like, I know that. Oh, no. Bart's got that issue in the future, right? Doesn't he pull it out? Oh, Fry's got it. Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, they're watching it on the TV, and it's like Chief Wiggum's going crazy, I think, and Fry's like, oh, hey, I have that issue.
I love that gag when at the beginning of the second part, they're watching what's happening right out the window on TV. Yeah. That's really funny.
And that's like right out of that show. Like I could totally see that scene in an episode. Yeah. And
can we talk just real briefly about that first interlude issue? Because it's crazy.
And it's got a joke that I thought was extremely hilarious. Yeah.
Real quick, would you mind giving us a breakdown of what that one's about, and then I want to ask you something about it.
Okay, so that issue is an election episode, which if you've seen the show, there are like a few election episodes, so it's not like completely out of the blue, but it's Mayor Quimby versus the cat Snowball 2, and so that's what it ends up being. And Snowball 2 is the more popular candidate, so she ends up winning the race. And then, since it's a cat, nobody can understand what it's saying.
And the only reason that happens is because Lisa's doing, like, a mock election as a class project, and then the local government is so desperate they latch onto it and decide that that's what they should do, and they put the cat on the ballot.
From what I remember, I think it's like Lisa puts up all these signs for the cat, and then she gives Ralph the signs for the dog. And Ralph is just Ralph, so he doesn't put them up. So people see the cat and think, oh, that's real.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, and didn't you love that Ralph dedication page?
Oh, that Ralph dedication page is hilarious.
There's a whole page that's just tracking everything Ralph does when he's not putting up the posters because he never puts one up.
Here, let me see. Where's that page? It's got a joke that I think is really funny.
Yeah, I'll put that up on the screen.
Yeah, so it says, like Ralph gets sick while going on the merry-go-round, and then it's like Ralph gets sick on the swings, and he gets sick in the sandbox. And earlier on, one of the things is that Ralph sees used gum. So after he gets sick on all these places, it's like Ralph realizes it's the used gum that's making him sick. Yeah,
like you said, they just get these characters. Like they got the voices down. Like that's exactly what he. And then every time he has one of those like ridiculous Ralph non sequiturs, it's spot on. Like every time.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I mean, he's a character that's probably not super easy to write because it's a very specific voice.
Yeah.
And it's just you got to be very just random.
So then, Austin, what's the bizarre left turn that issue takes?
So apparently when you become mayor, one of the first things you can do is remove an amendment to the Constitution.
And Lisa says, well, then let's get rid of all the guns.
And if you're familiar with Treehouse of Horror, they get rid of all the guns, and they're immediately invaded by aliens. This time...
Oh, I didn't realize that was a callback to that. Okay.
By the British.
Including Harry Potter.
Yeah, and Elton John, Doctor Who, and all the Spice Girls.
So, and then the way they get rid of them at the end is they just politely ask them to leave, and because British people are so polite, they just leave.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I burst out laughing when I was like, oh, the British have invaded, and Elton John yells that they've been waiting for over 200 years.
Did you think? Oh yeah, and then like that gag about the whites of their eyes, and they're like, "We're not falling for that this time."
They're throwing fish and chips at us. It's so hot.
So did you think that it was a little bit odd that with that interlude, if they made it for this, because again, I'm not totally sure, that you end up with like two giant mobs. And you could consider this weirdly foreshadowing. Like, what are the odds that like the comic that the Futurama people wind up in has a giant mob, and then of British people, and then you do the literature thing at the end, and the British people, it's mostly like a bunch of references to things you've seen before, and then you do exactly the same with the literature mob at the end, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say. But isn't that weird?
What's the
I don't
Simpsons,
know. I want to know how intentional that was. Sorry, what?
Said it's the Simpsons, so there's going to be a mob in there somewhere.
Well, that's fair. Something I wanted to mention earlier too is I like that when we go to the Simpsons and when we go to to Futurama, each of them feels more like whatever world we're in, an episode of that in its way. Like we do a bunch of like sci-fi parody stuff in the Futurama one, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and we get 2001 and Aliens and the Wampa scene, just all like back to back when they're doing the deliveries and stuff like that. No, they definitely.
They said it's the Lucas ice planet.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of Star Trek references in that too. They mentioned the Horta and all kinds of stuff.
Wasn't in one of the like 12 episodes I've seen. So.
No, that's TOS. So. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you if like the British mob thing might be going a tad far. How is that not an episode? Like, it makes me wonder how many of the issues of that book end up reading like, oh no, they should have done that. Because people are always, this is the point I want to make, people are always complaining about how the show is completely out of ideas and they shouldn't still be making it and it should have been canceled years ago. And of course, a lot of the people saying that can't possibly have watched it in 15 years, so they probably don't know. But then when you go watch it, when you do go watch it, it's like, yeah, they're kind of right. Like, occasionally there's a great episode, but like, I always say that, I'm like, how do you know? And then I'll watch one and I'm like, I mean, they don't know,
right.
but they're right. Yeah, but then you go back and you look at this and you're like, they ought to just be adapting the Bongo comics. Like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll go so far as to say that would have been like a really well remembered classic episode, but it would have been good.
Like I said, I don't know if you remember that Trails of Horror, but that's the one it first reminded me of. Where they melt down all the guns and the aliens invade.
I forgot about it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's the monkey's paw one.
So do you think that it's too like derivative or too callbacky to have been an episode?
No, because I think that was just it reminded me of that because it's a similar premise, but it's like a completely its own way.
Yeah.
So
it's so authentic. I'm like, how is this not? I had the same thing with the DC Powerpuff Girl comics a lot, where I'm like, well, McCracken said he was out of ideas after season 6 and didn't want to come back and do any more of it. But then I'm reading these like great original stories in DC, and I'm like, there were plenty of other things you could have done.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it just depends on the writers. I guess like these people should definitely be on the show.
Yeah.
If they're not.
It's so good, but then some of it could also be that they're stronger in their medium.
Yeah, no, that is true too. So I mean, yeah, like you said, this episode or this issue could definitely have been an episode. I could definitely have seen it, and I think you're right. It probably would have been a really well remembered one because it's quite great. And there's a lot of good British jokes. Like there's one where Homer gets into a car crash because he's on the wrong side of the road. And the police officer says the lorry had the right of way, and Homer just yells, "Who the hell is Lori?"
Who the hell is Lori? So let's briefly, because it's the obvious thing to do, but I think we probably ought to. Like, let's make the comparison and talk a little bit about the crossover they finally actually did. Because in comparison to this, because this came out years before they did that. So this is like 06. The crossover is 2014.
It's season 26, episode 6 is the episode.
Yeah, and they did exactly what Groening always acted like they would never do. And you and I have talked about this with Simpsons privately, but it's like there's constantly these goalposts that get moved with this show, where it's like there's these lines in the sand they draw that seem for the sake of integrity, and then they just constantly walk over them. Like inevitably, it's like if they say this is a thing we shouldn't do, it's a bad idea, it's gonna happen at some point. And it feels like the approach to the crossover was, well, everybody expected this to happen at some point, so their attitude was, let's finally knock that out. And it kind of shows, like, there's some good stuff in it. I don't hate it. I think it watches better on a second viewing, because I hadn't seen it in years.
I watched it a second time, but I didn't get to it.
I hadn't seen it in years, and I watched it again, and I was like, I like this better than I remember liking it. But at the end of the day, Groening was right that that they shouldn't have done it, or if they were going to do it, it should have been more like the book. And I don't just mean in making it a big event, although I think if you're going to do it, that's the way to do it. Partly because there's so many characters and so many things that you'd want to see happen. I can't say they don't get a lot done in 20 minutes, because they do end up actually having both sides in The Simpsons and then in the future. Like, in a weird way, it's not this, but it's some of it is like this truncated, where it's like they do recognize that people are going to want to get to see like both worlds, and so they do that, but they just don't have enough time to really play in it and do a lot with it, and they waste time on some kind of random who cares stuff. And so like, I think if you're gonna do it, you should have made it a movie. It should have been like Turtles Forever, or even like Flintstones Meet the Jetsons. Like, that's how you do this. Is that kind of thing.
Well, see, I had an idea for how you do it now.
Okay.
Which is you do it as like a miniseries type thing on Disney Plus.
Oh, sure.
Where you do like, I thought like 4 to 5 episodes, where you do like maybe 2 episodes on each side, and then like a transition episode.
Yeah.
And then like you do that, and then because it's something that just happened, you do it as a parody of like the CW Crisis stuff. Like, that's how you update it now, is you make fun of like the big crossover stuff we do with like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. or just crossovers in general, because like
yeah.
it hasn't happened yet, but we know the Marvel movies or the DC movies are going to do this, and very possibly the Marvel movies also. And you could even make fun of Spider-Verse with it.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's a lot of this kind of stuff right
yeah.
now where
exactly it's kind of the perfect time to do it. I think
that's a great point. You could make it a really novel thing where the joke is the novelty is worn off.
Yeah.
This isn't fun anymore. We do it with frickin' everything. Of course we're doing this now. And
you could do the CW thing where you throw in like a universe for 5 seconds and be like, look how cool this is.
Yeah.
Like Disenchantment for 5 seconds.
Yeah. That'd be a great idea.
Family Guy universe explode like the CW thing.
Well, and you're right. Like that would be the way to do it now. Is like bring in more of these kinds of things and make it mostly Simpsons and Futurama, but like you could also put in Disenchantment
like
in there
joke. And I mean, they put Family Guy in for like one joke in this comic crossover.
They did, yeah. But I would even
get watching it.
But I would even get more obscure with it, like the CW shows did, where they'll have references to shows that people don't remember anymore, like they did, 9 Seconds of Birds of Prey. Like do that kind of thing. Have the critic in there.
Have the critic in there.
Yeah. Because why not? And you can say, exactly. Nobody remembers that. Nobody remembers Birds of Prey either. Like you might as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like I said, I think this is kind of the perfect time to do it. Just don't do it as an episode on the show. You have Disney Plus, just do it as like a thing like that.
No, that's a really cool idea. And yeah, what they did was just kind of bland and obvious. And
I mean, it's better than the Family Guy Simpsons crossover, which is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
I've heard that. That's why I've never watched it. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't.
But the other thing is, this found a clever way to make the crossover work with the two universes, and I've always this kind of breaks a rule for me generally with crossovers, but it has to. And one of the reasons I love it is the way it gets around it and has a lot of fun with it. I talk about this all the time with comic crossovers, but very often we spend way too long figuring out how to get the two universes to merge. So we do interdimensional stuff, and we'll spend like half the book explaining how the universes were able to come together in the first place. And I'm like, it's a conceit. I don't care. Like, make that happen in the first 2 pages and then move on. Or better yet, say they were both in the same universe the whole time anyway. It doesn't matter because it's not canonical. We're never going to mess with this stuff again with either of these things. Simpsons and Futurama...
What's even worse?
Yeah.
The Simpsons and Family Guy one does the same universe thing and takes 15 minutes to get to the crossover.
That's awful. Simpsons and Futurama is a horse of a different color because... you could just like the TV show does, say they're in the same universe, and it doesn't matter because we're never really going to mess with it again, and it's not canonical. But because they're both graining properties and they don't look like they fit in the same world, fans never really wanted to see that, I don't think, and that's
it just kind of feels lazy.
Yeah, and like that's what I have with it, and so like I don't want to be a hypocrite when I say. It's cool when we say they're both in the same universe. That's when it makes sense that they would be. Like, when we did that in the 90s, this is not a good book, but when we did that in the 90s with Batman and Spawn, there's no reason those two things can't be in the same universe. There's no reason Ninja Turtles and Batman can't be in the same universe. Stuff like that. When you say...
Or Predator and Archie for that crossover.
Another great example. But with Simpsons and Futurama, you're already at a disadvantage because there's no way to say that they're happening at the same time, like if you did, Punisher and Daredevil or something, where it's like, well, these guys are just in different cities in the same universe, and we'll just ignore the fact that DC and Marvel have always been separate universes. With something like this, even if you want to say they're in the same universe, you already have to come up with a contrivance to get them together because one is set way in the future. So already you have to do this, right? So why not go the extra yard like this does and say, okay, we'll come up with a cool way to cross the universes and we just won't spend 19 years on it. And this doesn't do that. In the TV episode that they called Simpsons Rama or something.
Something like that, yeah.
they just do I'm with you. It's the lazy thing and say that Futurama is the future of The Simpsons, ignoring the fact that the art styles are totally different.
Like the art styles are different. We've seen the future in The Simpsons. We've seen the past in Futurama.
That's a good point too.
It's super lazy. Yeah, like you said. I mean, The Simpsons are yellow.
At least have a joke about evolution. That's what I really wanted, where it's like, well, we used to have yellow faces, but we've moved beyond that. Like, how's there not a reference? How does Fry and Bart get together and they're not like, wait, why are you yellow? Like, you didn't do any kind of a joke with that? Nothing? No kind of like silly race joke or nothing?
They could have made like a nuclear power joke or something. Anything. No, I agree. It just feels really lazy because it's like, one's in the future, one's in the past. They go back in time. It's like that's as much thought that was put into it.
Which was like the main reason they didn't do it before. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that. Well, and we see like Simpsons merchandise in Futurama. It's like it's clearly a show in that universe.
Oh, that might be part of the reason that this had the idea of making it the fictional property.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure part of the joke
is... They go to the trash planet or whatever, Meteor in Futurama, there's like a Bart doll and stuff like that.
Now that you say that, I remember that. Yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes of that show.
It's a really good episode, yeah.
I like that idea a lot because The Simpsons was such a huge a pop culture thing in the 90s. That, like, the idea of a thing that was spawned by it, basically, and has the same kind of, humor sensibilities, being, affected by the popularity of that 1,000 years in the future is really funny. So, that is the way to go with that. I totally forgot Futurama had already had The Simpsons as a fictional thing.
Yeah, I think they do a few jokes like that, and I think Simpsons did like a... there's like a reference to Matt Groening creating Futurama in a Simpsons episode. So they're definitely, not in the same universe.
So I can't imagine that diehard Simpsons fans or Futurama fans like that. And also, that was after Futurama got like an ending. Like an ending.
Yeah.
And then you just have it, like, when does that take place? Is it just any random time? Like,
and it's weird because, Simpsons, the timeline is more comic booky, where it's just kind of it's just all there. But Futurama, actually aged in normal time.
Yeah. You wouldn't get that sense at all watching that if you'd never seen that show. Couple things I like about it, though. The idea of, again, like, forgetting that I don't like the initial premise of having Futurama in Simpsons' future. Mm-hmm. The idea of Bender just turning himself off and being in the basement for 1,000 years, that's fun. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminded me of the Bender's Big Score movie, where Bender like goes back in time and then just kind of waits in the area that would be Planet Express until like the exact moment that he left.
And there are sci-fi things that do this with robots and androids. That's a Data thing in TNG. That, like, Trek fans make fun of all the time, where like because the Data. So there's an episode where they go back to the 1800s, and they end up having to do that because they find Data's head in a cavern that's been there for like 400 or 500 years or however long it is, and. Long story short, when they go back in time and they find the head, Data gets messed up and they have to replace his head with that head. So for the rest of the series, Data has a 500-year-old head. It's ridiculous.
That's really strange.
Yeah. So I was reminded of that because of the Data head in the cavern that's there for years and years.
Yeah, that reminds me of a thing my dad laughed about with Star Wars, with like the droids, where it's like, in real life technology, becomes outdated really quickly. Then you go to Star Wars and it's like they've had R2-D2 and C-3PO for like 60 years.
They've made no improvements whatsoever.
Well, they just put them on a soccer ball. That was how they improved.
Yeah, finally. But there wasn't like an organic like evolution to that. It just
was, garbage can with wheels and then a soccer ball. It's like.
Was there anything about that episode that you liked, or was there anything else that you were just really annoyed about, or do you remember anything about it?
To be honest, I struggle to remember what happens in that episode. I just remember there was like a time capsule. Bender has to kill Homer, and then I think Bart. And there was like Bart demons that came out of the time capsule. That's basically all I remember.
Because he put his snot in it.
And at the end, the demons go to like Omicron Persei 8, and then we get a crossover between those two aliens.
Where we reveal they're both female, because that's supposed to be funny for some reason.
Well, it's really weird because they say they're a couple, but like Kang always says Sister Kodos, like in some episodes, but I mean, Kang and Kodos have like no real continuity.
Oh, were they already girls? Was that already a joke?
Kodos was, because he calls her Sister Kodos. I don't know. Like I said, they have no real continuity with those two characters, so it's whatever. They can do basically whatever they want with them.
I mean, interestingly, or maybe not. Maybe some of it's obvious. Like a lot of the character parallels that they do in in the comic crossover, because I mean, like they get extensive with it, man. They're constantly pairing people up. Where it's like, did you notice that this character is kind of like this character? I mean, there's a ton of that. We should have talked about some of that earlier. There's a ton of that. The TV show,
the gangsters and stuff like that. Fat Tony becomes a maid man.
Yeah, a maid man. Yeah, he is a slave. He's a maid slave. As they both have a lot of the same archetypes, of course, and
well, that's you were talking earlier about how you don't really need to know either show to jump in, and it probably helps because they're both stereotypes, like all their characters are built around that.
Yeah, of course. And so you've got they do that with like Zap Brannigan's lackey guy with Smithers, yeah. Yeah, and I like that. We didn't talk about this, but I like that Smithers becomes kind of the villain.
Yeah,
in that second part, that's really fun.
Pirate.
Yeah, he's like, I always wanted to be a pirate, and so he turns around and takes over. And then, of course, as soon as he gets wind of Mr. Burns maybe getting together with Mom, he like turns around and doesn't want to be a pirate anymore.
Yeah, he's like, no, I need to get my man back.
Yeah. So that whole thing is pretty amusing.
Yeah, no, that stuff's fun. But yeah, they do a lot of like character parallels, like they do Scruffy and Willie, and like obviously like the family members get paired off. Like you said, Homer and Bender, and like Fry and Bart, and Leela and Lisa.
Yeah, and the Leela and Lisa connection was one of the more interesting ones that I wouldn't have thought of, like exactly the way they did it. They were really thoughtful about some of that stuff.
Yeah, no, that wasn't the connection I initially really thought of until they did it.
Well, they connect them with both her, or they connect her with both Lisa and Marge in a way, because you have that scene where she comes to the house and she and Marge are both trying not to.
Don't mention
not to let on that they think there's something weird about them. So she's like, don't mention the eye, and then Leela's like, don't mention the hair, and then they both say a thing that sounds that's pretty great.
Yeah, no, that was pretty funny.
Although now that it's running together, was that in this or was that in the show?
No, that was in this.
I thought that was in this, right?
Yeah, it's the first. Yeah, it's when they run into each other. Yeah, because it's their inner thought.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, of course. Okay. All right.
No, they didn't think of jokes for the episode.
I'm trying to give it credit where I can, because I remember there being some things that I thought were pretty good, but I'm not remembering them now. Like it's just not that memorable.
Was a joke I remember thinking was really funny at the start of that episode, but I can't remember what it is now. They do
those obvious pair offs. They've got Homer and Bender. I don't know how I feel about like Bart and Lisa coming right out and going, it's like somebody drew Dad, but as a robot.
Oh, I thought that was really weird. Yeah, in the episode.
Yeah.
No, that was really strange. And I was like, and if you're gonna go with that,
I would have been a little more subtle with it, because I don't know. That's almost too fourth wall breaky, and like I said, I like the comic doesn't really do that because it's like, well, you guys wouldn't see each other as drawn characters though.
Well, like I said, they mentioned that like the comic book store cutout, how that looks like Bender.
Yeah.
But they don't go as far to be like, hey, if you drew Dad and put an antenna on him, he's Bender.
They don't just say it. They pull out a piece of paper and they draw on it. Homer. Yeah. Like, don't do that. And then they do Farnsworth and the
Grandpa, yeah. And then Professor Frank.
And later. Professor Frank. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah. So they
initially because he's paired with Grandpa at first, but actually I think that's just for one panel.
Yeah. but they pair that up like they do here.
Yeah.
Because they actually do stuff with those two together in the book. And then I'm trying to remember. It seems like there were one or two other ones. But I don't know. It's just like I said.
In the book, they have like Hermes and Zoidberg, but they don't really have anyone to pair them up. Oh, Hermes kind of is with Smithers in that they both like appreciate like how bureaucratic the other is.
Yeah.
But they're not really paired off. They're just kind of on their own. And Zoidberg becomes Burns' doctor, which is kind of a funny joke where Smithers and Burns see Zoidberg and they assume that he's been like transformed into like a crab creature by the plant.
Oh, and then later he makes him his personal doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking lines from the show, and most of it's not good. Like there was one bit I thought was okay where Farnsworth says "Good news, everybody," and somebody goes, "That means it's not. That means it's not good news." That was okay.
Yeah, which is kind of a joke they do in the book because it's like he says "Good news, everybody," and Hermes is in the background, and he's like, "Good news, everybody" is like a line that's been copyrighted. It does not inherently mean good news.
Yeah, it's better in the book. Yeah, of course. And again, that's not an adaptation of this, but I did find myself wondering a little bit if they went back and looked at this.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's hard to tell if it's just kind of the obvious thing to do, like the Homer and Bender stuff, or if it's just they were looking at that.
And I know this is kind of a weird thing to say because obviously there's a lot of cynical humor in both of these things, like in Futurama and Simpsons, but like I feel like the episode isn't even trying at the heart that a lot of the best Simpsons has and that the book has. Now I'm saying that, I mean, you get to the end of the book and Fry's just like let the Simpsons keep being slaves, that's fine, like stuff like that. Where he throws them under the bus and stuff. But in the show, they have kind of. You'd think that Homer and like they do in the book, you'd think that Homer and Bender would just like get along right away, and they don't, and it's weird. And then like later they're sort of kind of buddy, but it's in like the last 2 minutes of the episode.
Yeah, it's like who cares at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they do that same jukebox joke that they had in the book.
Oh, do they? Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was weird. That was there.
Yeah, of all the jokes to bring over, that is really strange.
But anyway. Yeah. I just wanted to bring that up for a couple of minutes and say it's still not good. But like I said, while I was watching it, I thought it was a little bit better than last time.
Yeah, like I said, it's not the worst. It's not the Family Guy crossover, so I can at least give it that. Because you want to talk about cynical.
But I immediately was like, how are you doing this in 20 minutes?
Yeah. Well, that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, how... Because you had told me that they go to both spots in the episode as well, and I was like, I don't know, how do you do that in 22 minutes?
And, like, they did it.
Yeah. And, like, it's The Simpsons, so they gotta have, like, the first act story that's... normally it's not super connected to the rest of the story. It is in that episode, but it's still... You get the whole first act before you get the actual crossover. So, like, it's...
I also like that. Was that? I think this was in the book and not the show. I like that gag where they the Futurama people walk in and Fry's like, oh, The Simpsons is on, and it's just them sitting on a couch.
Yeah, that was in the comic.
That's pretty good. It's like, no, we're the Simpsons.
Yeah, because that's like the end of the whole joke where they're watching everything on the TV that's just happening around them. And then, like, the cops burst into the room and they're like, oh, it's a cop show now.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, because that's what they could have just looked out their window. But they're like, no, it's better on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Frank, like, flies through their window and, like, lands in the room. And Bender's like, hey, some guy just flew in some jerk's house.
Real quick, there were a couple other jokes I liked a lot that I wanted to mention. MC Escher sketch.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's brilliant. I hate myself for having never thought of that.
It only lets you draw stuff that hurts my brain.
That's so good. And I don't remember where it was, but where was the bit where Bender or somebody breaks out a window and Homer says, I've been using a door like a chump.
That's in the first interlude. That's not even part of, like, the actual crossover.
That joke hit me in a place, man. I thought that was really funny.
Oh, what's the character? Like, Lindsay Nagel or something like that. It's one of, like,
that's right.
Newer characters, but, like,
I didn't know who she was. Where she gets him to sign something on the staircase.
Yeah, 'cause she's the person who makes the ad for Snowball 2. She's living in the basement under the stairs.
Under the staircase, and then when they find her out, she just jumps out the window. That's what it was. I knew it was in this hardcover somewhere, but that joke killed me. That was really funny.
Yeah, because I was like, this feels like... That's, like, the one character where I was like, that doesn't feel like that character in this show. But it was so strange.
But it's really good.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not a character I've ever had, like, a big handle on, because, like I said, she's not one of the later characters now, because it's been on for 30 years. But, like, not, like, just outside of the classic era. It's probably, like I said, around season 10 or something, I feel like she comes in.
Also, do you want to mention the Shaft joke?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just talking about Mothra.
Yeah, we throw in a Mothra. That's one bad moth.
I'm just talking about Mothra. Shut your mouth. Anyway, well, now we're doing that irritating thing where we're just throwing jokes back and forth from a thing we read. It's really funny. We really enjoyed it. The art's great.
Yeah, it's a good thing that wasn't just the entire review. It could have easily been that.
It could have, and that would make us obnoxious, awful, pointless reviewers. But
you know what would have been better is if we put a giant red circle on the book where it's like, who's in this book? My red arrow will...
Should I do that in the thumbnail? Is that like an arrow?
Yeah, it's like, characters you didn't know were in this book.
And then it's
right.
Circle one of the main characters. Anyway, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. If you have never read this and you like either of these properties, you totally should. It's great. And I want to read and review some more Bongo at some point.
Yeah, it's great. And I got a bunch of them, so I'm down to do that anytime.
We spent a weird amount of time on this, but this is a thing I've always loved and have always wanted to talk about, so I'm glad we finally did it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you told me to check this out, 'cause it's a great book.
I'm glad you bought it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you were like, it's a great book, and the next day I was like, yeah, I'll buy this.
Well, that's the way to read it, like I said. And what sucks is the scans I'm able to get on digital are from the issues, so the art's not going to, or the transfer won't look as good as it does when you look at the book. So just take my word for it. It's a lot prettier than what you've been looking at on your screen this whole time.
Oh, is the art, like, significantly different from the issues to the trade?
No, it's just it looks better on glossy, and the scans I found are more faded.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't pop like this does.
Yeah.
Because I started reading it digital, just because I read a lot digital these days, and it's more convenient for light and stuff. And then I was like, oh no, can't do that. Better pull my hardcover out. So that's what I did. But anyway, thanks again for watching, folks. Austin, thanks for joining me, man. Come back again.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was great.
And we will see.
It'll be nice being trapped out of this vault, though.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, you can't be too claustrophobic because it's both vast and ominous.
I don't know. I don't like vast and ominous things. Because they're ominous.
Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. I was Captain Logan. This was Austin, the Day Ghost.
Yeah.
Later, everybody.
Bye.